Hi, I'm Colin Seal, CEO founder of thinkLaw. We are now looking at lesson 6, the shooter, and this is one of our lessons that involve investigations and discovery. Participants in thinkLaw absolutely love these lessons, but it's really sometimes a little bit tough to understand the structure of how these are laid out. So let me just kind of walk through the way this is going to work. We're going to start out by just having our thinkers overview the process of how they would find the lost item. And it might seem somewhat obvious, but there's a lot of questions and details that come up in this example that really help to demonstrate just what an investigation must consist of. What types of details really matter when we're talking about trying to find information. One of the key traits of great attorneys is they know how to ask the right questions to get information that they need. This lesson allows you to practice that process. So after we spend that time, we're also going to be looking at a real life case, but it's going to be factually incomplete. And what students are going to have to do is identify witnesses, key physical evidence, and questions necessary to figure out what's really going on here. Then we're going to give you some information, but it's going to come to you the same way that attorneys typically get it, right? It's not exactly what we were asking for. It's not complete. There's still some holes. So you're going to go through that process again of asking some more questions and then put together your own narrative of what happened based off of those inferences. And then we'll actually show you what happened, and you'll substantively analyze the case to determine whether or not the plaintiff should win. And then we actually have another extension, think bigger activity, another really interesting one that's related to the same idea of the shooter case, and give students a chance to analyze that as well. So when we look at this case, again, we start out with just its basic investigation. You have $10 in your pocket. You realize it's gone 3 hours later. When your thinkers first go through this and they're filling it out on that table, a lot of the answers will be pretty basic. But once you start to push them with the probing questions, who should you ask about what happened? What physical evidence should you look for? What other facts do you want to know about the money? What we're trying to focus is on is like, well, we just said it was $10. But this case is very different if this was $10 in quarters versus one $10 bill. Uh, does the time matter? Perhaps it does, right? Because between 8:30 and 11:30, that's a 3 hour time period. Probably be easier if it just was a 3 minute time period. Does it matter what difference, what day of the week it is? For some folks, their Saturdays are super busy, or their Sundays are sitting at home all day watching football. So it's a little bit easier to figure out where the money might be. Those are all the sorts of details that we're trying to do when we're building the habit to get that curiosity of like, well, what about this detail? What about that detail? Very, very important when we're trying to build critical thinking habits for our students. So we go through this basic case. A couple of things that have been really helpful here. One, having your thinkers draw a diagram of what happened, and they're labeling who the characters are. That would also help some of you folks that might not be the strongest readers to visualize what's going on here. Another thing, have this read more than once. So if you have one thinker read the passage about what happened in Bob's case, have another student read it again, okay? Some students might get hung up on the fact that, wait a minute, you're suing somebody who seems to be dead. Okay, that actually happens in the real world, right? But you're actually suing their estate. Sometimes somebody dies and they have insurance or other valuable items, so you could still sue them even though they're not alive. So that shouldn't be a big issue, but if it comes up, at least you'll have an answer for it. One of the first things we do is we push our thinkers to come up with what happened in the first 30 minutes. The reason we do this is because there's a whole set of witnesses that a lot of times thinkers wouldn't think about automatically. Like you wouldn't think about the 911 operator, but when someone gets shot, usually somebody calls 911. You often might not also think about the medic or the police officer that came and took the report, but these are all things that will come into your details when you're coming up with your plan here. So very important to start with that story and give them some time to come up with what happened in those first 30 minutes. Again, a very good thing to do in a group activity. As we do this plan, a couple of things, depending on how much time you want to spend on this. And to give you some background, I've seen this lesson take anywhere from one 50-minute class period to a whole week of 50-minute class periods just based off of how deep people wanted to go in this analysis. When you look at this table, you'll see that there's a witness being listed, but there's also the question of what this witness might know, how this might help or hurt Bob's case, and how this witness might be biased. In some sense, everyone has some sort of a bias, and most folks don't actually think about that, but it's really important, not just as a lawyer, but as anyone that's gathering information when they're making the decision, to think, why might this person be saying what they say other than the fact that it might be the truth? Okay? So once we go through the witnesses, we then jump to physical evidence again. We're trying to push them to think about things that would not normally pop out, like, the dead body itself was probably going to be a piece of evidence. Clearly, the military outfit, maybe the toy gun, or the gun that we believe is real at this point, and maybe the door, whatever the flashing light thing was. It's all these things that come up with physical evidence, but it's not just making the list. It's also pushing who would have the evidence, how might the plaintiff use the evidence, and how would the defendants use the evidence. So the important part here, again, if you're trying to save time, then maybe you don't have to fill out the 3 columns to the right. Maybe all you do is list the physical evidence and maybe have a discussion about who might have it, how would it be used, how would the defendant use it, how would the plaintiff use it. But again, if you want to take the time to go through it and really push students to be more thorough, because that's part of the point, right? We want them to develop habits to become a little bit more detail oriented in their thinking. So it's worth it sometimes to slow down and spend that time going through this. Same thing with the questions. The questions is interesting because the one thing that students have to do there is figure out who it is that they're asking these questions to. So maybe I'm asking Bob's neighbor this question. Maybe I'm asking the police officer this question. Maybe I'm asking the 2 friends that are still alive this question. And it's important, like, why is this important? Why do you want to know this? Why is it relevant to what you're trying to decide? And then we give them the first set of discovery. Your PowerPoint gives you that in the slides, so you don't have to read it all out loud. But if for some reason you're not using a PowerPoint, read it out loud, probably read it a couple of times so students can hear it. Maybe get a chance, maybe have your students repeat it back so that they know what those 4 facts are. And slowly but surely, you'll see, especially when students hear that fact about the incident happening in late October, they'll start to put 2 and 2 together that this must have happened at Halloween. But that's not the be-all end-all of it, right? If we know that happened at Halloween, we still need to push a little bit further, right? Like, what exactly happened on this Halloween occasion? So we go through the second set of discovery, they ask additional questions, and then we give them these 2 additional facts about Bob answering his door several times that evening, about Bob losing his son in the Vietnam War, and then you just want to have them come up with their story of what they think happened. Okay? Let them, a few people share that story out, and then you actually read out the story of what happened in the shooting, or put up the slide and allow somebody else to read what happened in that story. And then we actually analyze the case, right? Like in this case, he can only win if he says that it was reasonable for anybody in his position to think that he was going to be harmed. It's interesting because somebody's answering your door in a military outfit using a gun. Maybe that would work any other day of the year, but maybe not on October 31st. That said, we live in a pretty crazy world today, so I'm not sure how wise it would be to answer somebody's door in a military outfit and a gun that looks like it could be a real machine gun. So that's part of the think deeper here. The think bigger here is another interesting case, real life case, that involves 2 high school girls leaving a cookie on somebody's doorstep and running away. Very interesting analysis there. Kids get a real kick out of understanding that this case actually happened. And again, to keep them excited, have them wait until the next time to actually share the result of that case, because students like to be left on the edge of their seats like that. So thank you so much, and we will be moving on into lesson 7 for our next video.